2020, what went wrong? What went right? And songwriters are selling their catalogs, and we're going to take a look at 2021. Stick around, we have a lot to talk about. How you doing? Welcome to Music Industry Cities Tuesday Talkies, where we discuss what's going on in the world of music business. I'm Peter Schwing. Joining me today are my co-hosts, Sam Tall and the Duke. If there's something you'd like to chime in about, let us hear your thoughts in the comments below, or join us in the chat. We got all the chats going on. We have Facebook, we have Twitch, we have YouTube. We're everywhere. But, you know, the best place to come and hang out with is really over on Twitch, because that's more real time. Facebook is like 20-second delay and all that stuff. And this is going to be the last show of 2020, where everybody deserves a nice couple of weeks off. It's been a busy year. It's been a grinding year. And Sam Tall is going to take a look back at what he's covered over the year and what went wrong and what went right, and dip into his crystal ball and see what 2021 has to offer. So let's get to this. 2020 was a mess, or was it? Sam, well, what do you think?
Hey, Peter. So it was definitely a mess, but I think there are a couple of bright spots that we can carry with us into the new year.
No bright spots. I can't see out of this eye right now. This eye has an eye infection, so it's like all the bright spots are really bad. It's a good way to end the year.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we can't. I think this was the way that I ended last year a little bit, was with this mental sensation of like an airplane skidding down the runway sideways, just barely making it and landing safely. And I feel like the entire world is ending this year that way, and everyone in it. So I want to run down a couple of things. I spent a lot of time in the last 24 hours watching myself talk, which great for the ego, nitpicking all the things that I said right and wrong, and all the weird mannerisms and all the stuff. But in any case, there's a couple of things that I think it was very fascinating. You ever like look at photos or videos of yourself from like 10 years ago, and be like, ooh, that's grueling, that's embarrassing. How was I ever like that? Well, 7 months ago. Feels like 10 years ago.
And if you look at like our backgrounds and our production and our audio, it was all just completely just like, hey, let's just turn on the computer and go. And now it's like, all right, we have a thing going on. All right,
you didn't even have a green screen. You had like a payphone behind you.
Yes, I had. People missed the payphone. People have asked about the payphone, so I am going to bring it back. I'll have to put it on a stand or something back here.
There we go.
So, all right, Sam, I'll let you ride with this one.
Here we go. So I think the first things first is one of the first things I talked about in early May was kicking the can down the road with live concerts, right? And so we all know the story there. It's probably not, at earliest, we're going to get live concerts maybe in the summer, probably more like the fall. And the larger the concert, the later it's going to be before we see that return. My hope was that, we would figure out a plan that would let us, take a 3-month look and then every 3 months adjust course. Turns out that didn't really give us enough time to sort things out. And I think we spent way too much time chasing our tail. We collectively, like not only as an industry, but with governments and with states, and we just spent a lot of time like hoping for a positive thing to come about, as opposed to putting aside a determination about when it'll be fine and not actually doing the work about getting it fine. On the bright side, we're seeing a lot of uptake in monetized live stream concerts. I think that's a new thing that, for a few years, there's been conversation about how are we going to monetize live stream concerts? How are we going to make this a compelling experience when we have the real thing as our last sort of like finite resource when music is otherwise infinite and limitless in terms of its access. Well, now we know. I think this year has accelerated a lot of the questions and a lot of the answers corresponding, whether it's live stream, whether it's adoption of VR and how we meet in VR spaces, how we attend concerts, how we engage with production. I think everyone's a bit of a micro broadcaster now, as we are doing here. This is a primary mechanism of espousing our thoughts, as opposed to getting out to networking events, working the room, and kind of philosophizing amongst our peers. We rely on formats like this. I think that's going to stay the same for most of the next year. We'll see if that changes. Fingers crossed that with the vaccines starting to roll out yesterday in the United States and last week in Europe, that it's sooner rather than later. But I think it's going to take quite some time for that to reach the sort of like fullest extent of what it needs to in order for everybody to feel confident. The other thing that I really want to take a second on is the legal sort of landscape. There's a couple of things that happened this year from a legal perspective, especially around streaming royalties, that I think are going to play a significant role in what happens next year. If you recall, we talked about 8 Mile Style. This is Eminem's sort of vehicle for containing some of the compositions and master recordings around the film and some other works. And they've been embroiled in a lawsuit with Spotify since August of last year, and it's still ongoing. I checked into that recently and saw that there's a bunch of, the normal sort of court filings, this and that, and lawyers doing this and that, but there's very little substance and traction since things changed up in July when 8 Mile Style added Harry Fox Agency to the debacle and made the case that Harry Fox was aiding and abetting Spotify in defrauding 8 Mile Style of its royalties and issuing invalid notices of intent and trying to obtain licenses through the compulsory system that they're not entitled to. The entire system of compulsory licensing and the way that notices of intent, or NOIs, are issued, and the way that Harry Fox Agency factors into the equation of Spotify and other DSPs issuing royalties, monetizing the catalogs, associating with publishers and songwriters, is set to change at the beginning of the year. So this 8 Mile Style lawsuit is basically the last thing. It's the last dying breath of the pre-Music Modernization Act industry, where there's sort of like old school rules had to be abided for things to be valid. That's going to go ongoing. I mean, we saw things with David Lowery and the Wixon Publishing lawsuit a couple of years ago. The things that were we thought would be the last thing that happened before the law passed and things changed up with 2018 and going into 2019. Apparently not. And I think this is going to have an impact on Harry Fox's reputation. I predicted that it might like completely smack Harry Fox in the face and they might get a broader audit and inquiry. And that just didn't happen. I think Harry Fox Agency, I have my own opinions on them, and none of them are too positive. They're sort of a necessary evil in the music industry, but I think they're kind of impervious at this point. And it pains me to say it, but I think that, when the Mechanical Licensing Collective goes into operation in the new year and the Music Modernization Act starts to show its actual effects, I think we're just going to see Harry Fox become infrastructure. They're going to become the Con Edison of the music business, in that like nobody loves what they do, but they're kind of part and parcel of New York City, and this is going to be part and parcel of the entire music ecosystem, inextricable. And I think that's one of the greatest sort of coups of Harry Fox as an agency in its entirety. And then last, I have one fun little thing for you, Peter. We talked with Jake Knock this year, and we bandied about his Spotify lawsuit and suing the entire music industry, and we made the sort of prediction that Jake would maybe execute some further unscrupulous legal behaviors and try and just drum up attention for his own businesses, and then maybe potentially parlay that into actual legitimate business operations with pro music rights. And, it's generally not a bad idea. It's sort of a TuneCoreization of the PRO model. Except that Jake has done some more fishy things. So recently in the Artist Managers Connect Facebook group, Jake was very proud of the fact that he settled some suits that then resulted in an option to acquire shares of Pro Music Rights, PMR, by some other companies that he had allegedly been in private arguments and lawsuits with, and arbitration and whatnot else, and transacted in the amount of like some $600 million. The fact of the matter is, it's all paper. It's not even money. It's just options. It's things that don't have to get exercised. It's not even sure if the suits are real. And frankly, every sign points to the fact that Jake owns these companies that he was suing or in a lawsuit against. Look, Jake, if you're out there, I know you listen to this show. I know you watch the videos sometimes, and I know you're part of the community. I don't know what you're doing. I don't know what you think this is going to get you, but I just don't. I can't see it playing out well, bud. You know, it smacks me of somebody who's just really trying to make a name for themselves by any means necessary, and there are more honorable ways. I don't think this is going to make a power player. I think this is going to make a noisy jester in the court. And I think, you know, once 2021 kind of picks back up with live music and performing rights, and we maybe see some more lawsuits against promoters who are failing to account when that's not even their business for performing rights royalties. If anything, it'll be entertaining to watch. I'll save my bit about the parliamentary inquiry into music streaming. I think that still has a long ways to go, but if anybody remembers me talking about user-centric payment models, I think that's coming, and we'll probably talk more about that once we see some responses to that in the new year. And that's my perspective.
Right on. Yeah. Yeah, so much there. And I love the fact, like, going back in time in the Wayback Machine. So let's work reverse chronologically, because I do have a couple questions about 2020. So the UK parliamentary, we're going to be covering that quite a bit going into starting in January. And we're going to bring in some guests who are over in the UK. So they're really seeing it, they're being part of it. So we're going to bring in some great guests on that. The Jake story. And again, like there's one thing you said. It's like you don't know if it's just paper money, because there was one thing that really stuck out in one of the sentences is, you know, here's the legal suit, and they can collect the options if they choose.
Yeah,
which means they don't have to exercise it. Yeah. They don't have to exercise this. And yes, he does own the two companies. He's chairman and CEO of the two companies that he sued. So,
oh Jesus,
I don't know.
We love to just kind of like, I mean, look, I hate to pick on somebody, and I you know, it's so bizarre. For somebody making so much noise to have so little backing it. And look, I would have held my tongue a little tighter probably earlier this year, but now it's just like, it's so ridiculous.
Well, we had him on, and it was like, here, let's hear your story, because, you know, I'm all for people that are going to fight for songwriters' rights.
Sure.
And songwriters' rights, like, yeah, so like, let's come together and let's support it. But when, like, you see something like this, it's like it loses credibility within the industry to take you serious on that. Like, yeah, let's have another PRO. Let's do something. Let's, you know, I'm so like, what? Like, I can't even think of words right now. But it's like, you know, to support each other and like, yeah, like, let's do this. But like, when you start seeing this, and this is what's being promoted as opposed to what the organization does.
I feel like there was an opportunity to kind of be a next gen Jeff Price. A firebrand, a true fighter, a highly principled person who lives and breathes, you know, artist rights and artist royalties. And, you know, say what anyone will about Jeff, is the fact is that he is dedicated to a true honorable cause, and it's probably at some points to his credit and some points to his detriment, but you can't fault him for trying so hard and being so rigid about his position and being really honorable in that respect. Yeah. And Jake is just like he's aping the sort of attitude of it without actually doing anything on the backside of it. And it's just like, look, there's an opportunity for him to turn this around, and I hope he does. Mm-hmm. I'm happy to talk to him about it and happy to even like work with him to kind of make that the case, because again, I think artist rights and user-centric payments and all this kind of stuff is super, super key to the next level of the music industry. But it's all for show.
Yeah. And that's not the music. The music industry likes a good show put on by performance. They don't like the dog and pony show, because the music industry is so accustomed to bullshit that it's like, you can smell it, walking us. It's like, and we all know, and we know who the snake oil salesmen are, and we all know that. And it's like, so it's kind of like, all right. But, it is really the business that gets done. It's really, there is that honorable business side to it. So real quick then, before we kick over to the Duke, 2021, what is on your radar?
So I think the UK parliamentary inquiry is going to set up a lot of things in other countries, perhaps the European Parliament as a whole, perhaps US Congress. I think that's going to become more clear once we get on the other side of the Georgia Senate runoffs, and which way the Congress is going to lean. One thing's for sure is that we're hopefully, and very probably at this point, it seems like it's increasingly the case, going to spend the next 4 years as bored as possible with government. That would be a great change. So on that front, I think there's going to be a lot less discussion of how government action impacts the music industry, and a lot more operating in the music industry on a set of rules that don't really change that much, because frankly, we're all a little tired of change and unpredictability and things kind of shifting under our feet. That would be, in my opinion, probably the best case at this point. And it seems likely that we're going to get a little bit of that stability, and boredom is not a bad thing. I think we can all agree on that now at this point. And again, I said this about when I was referencing my take on Live Nation and concerts and all that stuff. Live Nation had enough capital to weather the storm. We're seeing Mark Geiger, who acquired a bunch of stakes, or at least put together a fund to acquire a bunch of stakes in small venues. And that, I think, is going to become another counterweight to Live Nation and AEG, which is well needed, especially at that bracket, to recover the sort of starting line of the music industry. The base level, the introduction, the club scene is super, super key. I'm holding out hope for that. I think there's mixed opinion, but I think once the club shows return, maybe late summer, early fall, fingers crossed, I think we're going to see a lot of talk about how right or wrong Mark Geiger was. I'm leaning towards right. That's my bet.
That's a good horse to attach your wagon to. So, Sam, thanks for everything. Thanks for a fantastic year. We're gonna cut over to the Duke, but then let's circle back and let's get everybody back on the screen. All right.
Sure
so
thing.
Thank you for that, Sam. All right, let's now turn our focus onto songwriters and selling off their music catalogs. If you've noticed, probably quite seen in the news, a run about artists such as Bob Dylan, David Crosby selling their music catalogs. Stevie Nicks sold the majority. Why is this all of a sudden? So here's an interesting note that, in the recent article in The Guardian, Mark Mulligan of Media Research stated, the music publishing deal market is at its peak. There has never been a better time. There may never be a better time. For hit artists from the 70s, 80s, and 90s to sell their rights, these deals are being done at 17, 18, 19, 20 times value. So with his thoughts on this one, let's kick over to the Duke. Dave, how are you? Is that me that made you mute? Oh, there we go. Now I can hear you.
Hello, I am here.
Hey.
Yeah. That was a wonderful quote that you put there.
So what's your thoughts? I mean, this is that you've seen the, and there's two things just, to tee off is that when they talk about the Biden administration, we discussed like the capital gains tax. So a lot of people are trying to get these deals in before it happens. But it's just like within the last week, you're talking about 3 very prominent songwriters in history. So what's your take?
Dollars, man, is business. You know what I'm saying? And if you think about it from the artist perspective, it's like, so Bob Dylan was what, 300 million, and then Lil Wayne came in with 100 million. So you're saying in comparison, Bob Dylan is worth 3 times as much as Lil Wayne. And Lil Wayne, just to make up numbers, let's say he makes $10 million a year on his music that he sold. That's only 10 years. That's only a 10-year deal. In 10 years, he could have made $100 million, but he decided to sell it. So that, to me, that says that asset is not worth what it once was. A la Blockbuster, Netflix. Like, we can make new masters. You know what I'm saying? Just because you own the master doesn't mean that you own the song. That's a totally different thing. If you own the song, that's a whole different number, because that's forever. The master, you of course you can use a Milli the master, but I can make a new a Milli the master, and I'm going to make my own deals because it's easy to get in touch with me, because you could just DM me on social media. I don't need you anymore. So let's make a deal. And it's like, all right, cool. But let's take all of this. And so say he is making $10 million a year. Now that record company or whatever company that is, now they get to make that $10 million a year. So for them, it's rad. It's like, oh, rad. I get to make this money and I get to own this master. But for the artist, it's also rad because you just got all this money in an asset that you know is literally just growing moss, because you have a hard drive and you have a computer, and it's a whole different game. So Bob Dylan, if he wants to re-record Times They Are Changing, that's the new master. You got to call up Bob, because Bob owns the song. So until you own the song, it's quite a different story. So we're really talking about, in the music industry and these type of artists, we're talking about going grocery shopping pretty much for the next 10 years. It's like Trader Joe's, Whole Foods. Let's make sure we eat well, but we got another 50 years in front of us, Lil Wayne, 60 years. So, we got to really think about the big picture. $10 million, $100 million is just the house payments for the next 10. Make sure we have our 4 cars, and you know what I'm saying? The pool costs money and things cost money. So, good deal on all sides. I give it a thumbs up, but you got to look at it and go, you know what? Times they are changing. Why is it happening? It's because that thing is not worth as much as it used to be. Because back in the days, you'd have a whole room with a plate reverb. So reverb costs money. Now reverb is free. Think about that for a second. You know what I'm saying? That's the whole game right there. Amen. End of scene. 2020. It's been a wrap. I love it. It's been great hanging out with you guys. And always going to spread the positive vibes. Let's see how 2021 is going to be, and who's next to line up for that money from whatever company is buying their masters, so they can make new masters and make more money.
Right on. Yeah, and there's 2 things in that. Some sound like, it's like, okay, here's my catalog, but here's my publishing, and like that whole thing is like, it works for the right now, especially for like Dylan. It works to sell the catalog because, it's money. It makes money. You, like, if you were to take $300 million, so say if he did clear $300 million, they're saying it was closer to $400 million, whatever. Let's just say after all business expenses, tax, all stuff, it was $300 million. His catalog is going to devalue over time. So even at the course of life, plus 70, it's going to decrease over time. So if he takes that $300 million and he wants to invest in the family estate, that money invested properly will actually probably yield more than if they were to hold on to the catalog over time. So it's a real great deal for the publishing company, because they can take that song and then it can be used in commercials. They don't have to use the actual Dylan track. They can have re-record. So it's unlimited possibilities. So there's a whole bunch there. And here's a big thing to note. Last year, more than $4 billion was spent on buying artists' music catalogs, according to media. And that was like 0.8 billion just 10 years ago. So you're talking about a less than $1 billion to $4 billion. And it's like, and it was pretty flatlined. It really had a very small gradual, and then it was the hockey stick curve over the last 2 years. So it's really interesting. I'd like to bring up Sam. Let's kind of put everything together. So I want to get Sam into this conversation, because I know he's got some thoughts on this. So as we're closing out the year, we're going to close it out together. Sam.
I'm back.
All right. I know you have some thoughts on this. I mean, Dave makes some really great points there. What are you thinking?
He does. I think Dave's on the money when it comes to where the money is, as it were. The songs are what lives, and the masters are, the phono records are photocopies, if you will. They're worth something, but you got to have like a really particular one. And apparently there's somewhat like 6,000 covers of some Bob Dylan songs, or whatever the number was that was pressed about. That just tells you what the masters are like. This is where I think the chips stack in the music business, right? We talk about the fact that the record business makes 4 or 5 times more than publishing, because it's like the masters get 52%, the publishing gets 15%. It's like a whole, value gap. But there's also the fact of the matter that there's one song and there's as many recordings as you want, reasonably speaking. So masters are definitely worth something. If you can afford it and if you can stand it, don't sell your masters, young artists. Independence is a power position. But write your songs. And own your songs and carry your publishing. I think that's going to be worth something more in the long term. As far as Bob Dylan's concerned, you're right, Peter. Like $300 million, let's say you put it in a 10% yield, you got $30 million a year. Versus some of the conversations that I've heard, some of the hearsay, puts the annual earnings of the royalties of that catalog somewhere in the 8 to 12 million range. Mm-hmm. So he's making a lot more money investing that money than he is from the royalties. Meanwhile, Universal can just sit and say, like, we have the Bob Dylan catalog. Mm-hmm. It's like when I worked at Downtown and Downtown signed Yoko Ono and the John Lennon estate. It's like, that's an expensive deal to do. And the percentage on the admin of that is very low. However, being able to say that you do the John Lennon stuff, it's prestige value.
Carries a lot of weight. Yeah. And some of it is just when you have money, some of these that have money, it's like, hey, I just want to own that for the sake of owning it. And that's what's great. And, people are also, you have two sides of the coin here. It's like, you look at the business, and people are saying like, oh, financially, it actually makes sense to sell your catalog. And then others, and this is the big thing in the music, it's like, this is your baby. Why would you ever sell your work, your art? Why would you ever sell it? Well, there's that. Now you flip the coin again and people are saying, well, isn't art for the public anyway? It's like, why can't I do with whatever I want to do with it? It served a purpose and I can treat it like real estate if I want to, because it is my art. And
I'm very much looking at this from like a financial instrument perspective. And I'd love to know, Dave, from your perspective, how you examine not just deals like that are big and heady like this, but there's plenty of small artists and small outfits doing like very, very quiet deals that are a lot less lucrative, but still very meaningful and impactful for the artists of that scale, where it's like, if you had the opportunity to sell your catalog for, I don't know, $300,000, would you do that, or would you just say like, that's not worth it because it's my art?
Depends on your level of success and what you see for your future. You know what I mean? You can have success. I've had success. You can have success, but to rise and have worth. You can have success in 2009 and be like, oh, I killed it in 2009. But is what you made in 2009 going to be worth anything in 2029? And that's the thing. And so it's like, hey, here's 300,000. Go get yourself a house. Or let's bet that the song that you wrote in the bedroom with your girlfriend 20 years ago that you don't even remember what she looked like that's going to be worth something in 30 years. Like, it might have a value now and it might not have a value later. Or on the same coin, it's like, maybe you will have success that will continue. Do you know what I mean? Maybe like you actually forever. The Beatles will be forever. Mozart will be forever. But you can't name list of the top 10. Who was number 6 in 1793? You know what I mean? Beatles still going to be the Beatles. But other than that, I mean, your grandchildren can listen to your songs, but can they live in a house? You know what I'm saying? It's one thing's going to protect you from rain, and the other thing is something good to listen to. You know what I'm saying? So think about that.
I love it. Sam, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I like the perspective about, it's about where you think you're going and what's important to you. And if what's important to you is leveraging your assets for something that's more secure and important to you in your long-term life, or if you think that a song is gonna continue to write you checks for the rest of your life, where you place your own personal value is a personal decision. I think there's a lot of perhaps overhype right now on what these assets are worth from a financial perspective, and a lot less conversation than there should be about what they're worth from an artistic perspective. I don't think anybody, saying that Bob Dylan is selling out is right, because Bob Dylan's been in commercial implementation with his music for decades. And this isn't the first big thing that he's done where he makes money. He continues to tour, even though I question whether people, really love going to listen to Bob Dylan live. I've seen him live. You're there more for the experience and the saying you were there than the voice of the great troubadour. Mm-hmm. But in any case, Dave, I appreciate your perspective on that, and well, for one thing, my friend, I hope that your music catalog continues to appreciate into the new year and ever after.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Well, nice long term. Nice play on the words there. All right. Hey, so thank you guys. This has been an interesting year, and I actually find it to be a great year for what we're doing. So I'm just so happy that you two decided to come aboard and say, yeah, let's do this. Let's have some fun, and let's have real conversations, and hopefully people look at this and say it helped them with decisions, or it made them look at something. It's more about that opening up to just that thoughts and thinking about the industry in a different way. So thank you to you two.
Thank you for having us, Peter.
All right. And that is going to be it for today and for 2020 Tuesday Talkies. Thank you all for tuning in. We really appreciate the support. And especially everybody over at musicindustrycity.com who is registered and everything, and joined us in the chats and the conversations. And if you want to continue that conversation, leave a comment below. Find us there. Hit the notification bell to be alerted of new shows. And we still have a few more shows. Tomorrow will be Wednesday's news updates, and then Thursday will be the final 2020 version of New Thoughts, and then Freeform on Thursday nights 9 p.m. Eastern, and that's a call-in show. So the regular scheduled programs will be wrapping up this week, but next week I am going to do some just like live call-ins and hangouts. And for the residents of musicindustrycity.com, who the people are signed up there, we are going to be hosting a Zoom happy hour, a little get-together. So check it out at musicindustrycity.com and on your preferred podcast player. Thank you again to my fellow co-hosts, Sam and the Duke. Have a rocking day. Peace.